Hey, I'm Renton Millar. I am the head judge of park skating for Wsk. Right now, about to do a judging exercise. We have an event that we ran in 2019 in Nanjing, and we have rejudged that event to give you scores that are going to correlate to how we see park skating is modern park skating. So the process and evaluations that we've done through this particular exercise, we have done it to emulate exactly what we would do as far as any qualification events for the Olympics or the Olympics, and apply the same criteria, the same technique of judging, looking at the run and giving an overall impression at the end, and then giving a score that will correlate to skateboarding in 2024 or 2025, even though this event was held in 2019. So this is an interesting task for a few reasons. As I've mentioned in some of the videos in the past, skateboard competitions aren't consistent every single day as far as the scoring. The scoring can vary and generally does every single time. And that's because the way we score is in a rank order evaluation, which means that you're given a score that correlates to the position that you're going to be in the field. And the scaling between days can vary, and that's just because you have different skateboarders skating in different phases of the competition. And the more you watch skateboarding, the more you'll realize in skate events that you can have a varying score from day to day with very, very similar stuff. So what that means for the task that we're doing right now is I've given my best shot at giving a score that would be relevant to modern times, 2024, 2025. But at the same time, I'm really looking at making sure that I get the order right in the competition that I'm judging as well. So we're just going to note that there might be a little bit of variance just based on the scaling aspect of the event and how it varies from day to day. So this was definitely an interesting task. It also showed me how much skateboarding has progressed since then. It also showed me how much I think the skaters and federations and the coaches have learnt about how the judges score. I think by watching this event, I saw a lot of skaters repeating tricks because possibly they weren't quite aware of how much judges are looking at certain things like that. That's one of the criteria that the judges are looking at. They don't want to see people repeat tricks. But in looking at this event, there seemed to be quite a few people repeating tricks, whereas in modern times, it's less so. Also, people go a lot bigger now because we have mandatory helmets. It seems back then from watching this video, it seems that a lot of the skaters were kind of afraid to give it full gas and really fly, whereas the addition of the helmets means people sort of have less of a care about sort of smashing themselves. They're a bit more secure, and so they go a bit bigger. So with the FOP, it was a pretty fun one to skate. Shallow end, quite mellow, easy to skate. Deep end, quite deep, allowing for some pretty rad vert tricks. We had the bank. I think at that time, whenever we put a bank up, we saw most people do very similar tricks. We saw a lot of bonelesses. Didn't see a lot of variation in tricks. A lot of people doing bonelesses on the bank. So I mean, in this particular event, there was a few people that did tricks up the bank extension, and that was pretty cool. That was a bit different and added a bit of a help with the use of the park in their scores, with their particular scores. We had the bridge. So this bridge wasn't an easy one to skate. I remember it being very long. I remember thinking that it was longer than what I expected it to be when I saw people skating it. You had to hit it with a lot of speed. It wasn't easy to skate, and hence like not everybody's hitting it in the competition. So whenever there's an obstacle it's not easy to skate, the judges are going to reward skaters for using that. It's more of a challenge, it just makes sense. I also found that going over the bridge, it was going to be way harder to go frontside than backside. I think in this competition, we didn't really see too much in the way of advanced tricks over the bridge. It was likely to be some just pretty basic tricks. I think using the bridge in a way that linked together other obstacles, that was also a good thing for people to do. And I think the more advanced skaters linked together that bridge with other obstacles. We also had the spine, and this was pretty cool because being that it was a small transition, I think it allowed for some good variation, a bit of a key feature. Also, I think it's like a spine can be for a non-advanced skater a bit of a trap to going back and forth. If you're just going a straight trick straight over it, it can you can just get straight back and forth, bit of repetition going the same way. I think, to hit it properly, a skater sort of had to hit one obstacle, go through the spine, perhaps, not just going straight over it, but carving over it. I think I saw a few people when they went back and when they went straight over it, it was a lot of back and forth type of approach. Also strange that I did notice as well in watching this video that in the small section we had a lot of people repeating really basic tricks, which is kind of ironic really, because being that it's small and easy to skate, you wouldn't think that we'd have people repeating tricks like backside 50-50s and stuff, but we did, and I think that was possibly the reason being was maybe people back then didn't really understand the judging, and they didn't understand that your whole run needed to be full of different tricks and skateboarding was less advanced. Okay, so the extensions added a bit of difficulty to the small section, a little bit of variety, another obstacle to hit. Small hips were very straightforward, easy to skate, fun to skate, good way to get you from point A to point B doing a trick. So the teardrop, linking a run together using the teardrop was good. Not everybody else used the teardrop, so it added a bit of flavour and added a bit of point of difference to people that used it as opposed to people that didn't. So the deep end was pretty much a vert ramp. Well, it was a vert ramp basically, just with some capsuled corners. One thing about the deep end, if people really repeated the same walls back to back, like just went back to back and half piped it, I think they got punished for that. Ultimately, the easiest sort of wall that you can use in a park is just a straight quarter pipe or a straight vert quarter pipe. So it's good to use them, but if you're using it back to back, like back to back to back to back, you're really repeating the walls. You're repeating something, and as you well know, repeating is a part of the criteria. We don't want to see people repeat tricks or obstacles. So if you're going back and forth, vert ramping it, when you have the opportunity to use the corners and the other obstacles, then you are going to get some problems with the repeating, which we saw a few people do in this competition. So this deep end really kind of shone a light on how much skating has progressed, park skating. In 2024, we see massive airs done by a lot of people, big 540s, kickflip 540s, quite a lot of stuff like that. Back then in 2019, it was less so. I think because people weren't wearing pads so much or helmets so much back then, we really weren't seeing big airs and big 540s quite a lot. People have been doing those things, massive airs and massive 540s for a long time, well before this competition. And I think the only reason we didn't see it is because people weren't wearing helmets and pads for a while. And I think that just shows the progression of where we've gone, where we've come from and where we're going. and now we're just seeing a lot of bigger airs, bigger 540s, bigger tricks in the deep ends. And as well, like, also didn't really see any girls do McTwists in the deep end, which is quite different to now. Women's skateboarding is advanced so much, and I think this competition was right before girls started doing 540s in park competitions. I think at the next event or the previous event was the first time we saw Masugu do a mute 540 in a competition and make history for the women, and now it's a bit more commonplace. So we have men group number 1. Our first skater, the anchor, is Ethan Copeland. So Ethan is at this stage essentially a little kid. He has a lot of power, but he still has a bit of a kid style. Nice line, a little bit of repetition with a couple 50-50s, back lip and back D in there is pretty similar, so getting a little bit of punishment for repetition in there. It's a full run. Skating has advanced a lot since this time, and so has Ethan, but that run I think these days would be a 44. Okay, so next skater we've got Josh Dirksen. So great skating. I think his approach is really, really good. His backsmith over the bridge is a really, really advanced trick into the backside blunt. That's a great combo. He's got variety in there. He's got consistency. Got good execution. I think his skating really suited the park. I really liked it. Not quite the level of modern skating, but a good run. 61.6. Okay, so next skater number 1, we got in group number 1, we got Heracles Fagundes. So a great run. Execution was really, really good. It had a lot of difficulty in there, creativity, a lot of stuff in there was very unique. The kickflip frontside stalefish is not a trick we see all the time these days, and so back then 5 years ago even sort of less so. That's a great trick. He does it well. Frontside 5 to fake is also a great trick. So what we're seeing with Heracles is a different approach, a more creative, different view of skating, going in a different direction to other people, which makes him stand out. But a really, really good run. 74.2 from Heracles. Okay, so next skater we got William Cortez. So a good run, doesn't really stand out though. Repeated the backside 5-0, had a couple of Indias in there, so a bit of repetition, nothing too technical or difficult. The stale decker was nice, but again, just didn't stand out, so that's a 38. So next skater, we've got Yuro Nagahara, run number 1. So not as developed as he is now, obviously, like he's skating very well at the moment. He's just developing at that stage. Still got a lot of speed, got a nice style, not really standing out yet. Came off early with 9 seconds left, so he gets a 34. Anytime you come off early, you're gonna be punished for it. Okay, so we've got Zhang Jing next. At this stage of the game, 5 years ago, skateboarding in China was pretty much brand new. Below the current standard certainly, but definitely below the standard back then. But Chinese skating on their way up at that stage. Did a lot of basics and fell, so he gets a 15. Next skater, Lenny Jansen. So back disaster up onto the bank. This is a creative way to skate the bank. I mean, most other people that hit it do it boneless and they don't go up it, they do it on it. So him traveling up to it was definitely a different approach. Got a bit of a mini ramp, Steez going along. Tail grab varial is a different move. It's not the hardest move, harder than the straight air, but definitely different. So memorable and definitely showing some difference to everyone else. A bit of creativity. But his consistency is suffering because he bailed in there with 8 seconds remaining. So Lenny Jansen, first run, 29. So next skater, Hyun Seong Im. So he's from a country that's new to skating this stage. So a pioneer from his country, really. So he has a less developed style. A lot of stock stuff. I mean, he's just a kid at this stage. Pretty much made a run, but pushed on the flat. Pushing on the flat, we really don't want to see in a bowl. So not a great deal of fulfilling all the criteria. So 25. Okay, so Elias Nielsen. He's definitely come a long way since this event. Starts the run with repeat use of the bank. So his first couple of tricks are on the bank, which if you're repeating the tricks or you're repeating the obstacle, it's still repetition. So we're gonna give you a bit of a docking for that. You want to have a bit of variety in the obstacles that you're hitting and the tricks that you're doing. At this stage of the game, he's not really standing out greatly. He's better than some of the previous skaters. Full run, but only a 35 for that run for Elias. So next skater, we've got Iyumu Hirano. So Iyumu is a great skater. Doing the basics really, really well. I always mention that it doesn't matter how difficult what you're doing is. If you're doing it really well, it's going to stand out to the judge at least a little bit. I mean, unless you're doing like the most basic tricks. I mean, if you're doing tricks that are just stock standard stuff like his Smith grind over the bridge, it's a basic trick just done really, really well. He's a great skater. The Mellon 540 is really, really good. He does that out of a frontside air. Being a vert skater myself, I know that the first port of call for people to do a 5 is out of like a straight backside air. Going frontside into a backside 5 puts a little bit of flavour into it, bit of variety, and he does that. And his frontside air was good. It's snowboard style, which I think is cool coming from a Yumu. He is a snowboarder. He skates with speed and power. He bails at the end, which costs him 49 for a Yumu. Okay, so Jagger Eaton. So Jagger has a unique approach. He is quite creative. Different tricks. Quite skilled on street, vert, park. So he definitely brings a lot of stuff that maybe not usual park skater will do. In this run, the 360 Indy, I feel is a very courageous move, particularly padless. I mean, you know, if that was done with pads these days, it would be less likely to stand out. But back then, because less people wore pads and helmets, you were less likely to see it, so it stood out a bit more. It's not the fact that he's wearing pads or he's not wearing pads, it was just a different environment. Less people were doing them, so it was going to stand out. I mean, people still don't do this trick a lot now, but I think a lot of people could do this trick. The combo to the switch ollie is also really good. And then he ends with some nice blunt moves. Doing different tricks and having a different approach is going to make you stand out. I think that was one of the better runs so far. So 64 for Jagger. Okay, so back up to the top of the order, we've got Josh Dirksen. So he swapped the backside Smith for a backside Feeble over the bridge. To me, back Smith is just way better. I think perhaps so far through this competition, the back Smith's been the best trick over it. So to take it out, I don't know if it really did his run any favours. Front to there into the deep is cool. Linking the obstacles together well. Gets a little bit half pipey in the half pipe, which is essentially a bit of repetition. So, you know, essentially you got the half pipe is, you know, two walls. So if you're going 2 quarter pipes, that's basically 2 of the exact same walls. So when you start doing more than 2, you're really repeating the same obstacle. So you don't want to get stuck in the half pipe. I think the judges are going to hold that against you. So he had a little bit of repetition. And he also repeats frontside air, but he has generally good use of the park. But I think his first run was better. So 58. So second run from Heracles. So he had a great first run. Interesting to see if he could back it up and make it better. He has a good style, uses the park really, really well. Very much a park skater. He took out the kickflip stale, which I think was a shame, as that was a real key part of his first run. He uses the deep well. At the start, he is using it like a bowl and not a half pipe, which I think is cool because other skaters are half piping a bit. He does slip into some half piping, and he repeats the similar frontside grinder fakie types moves, the frontside grinder fakie around the corner, which is great. And he comes back and just does the frontside 50-50 to fakie. I mean, it's a great trick, but they're both really similar. I think if you're going to frontside 5-0 to fakie around the corner, I think it's quite clear that you can do a frontside 50-50 to fakie. It's maybe not completely clear, but it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that you could do it. There was no guessing of what's he doing next. It's like, okay, so he did a very similar trick. Takes away from the variety a bit, but 2 good tricks. I don't think it was as good as his last run. 59. Okay, so William Cortez, he loses speed at the start but regains it. Boneless has done well, but not a greatly unique trick to be doing on that bank. I always say that, you know, if you want to do well in a competition, stand out. And it's really hard to stand out if you're just doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. 50-50 to fakie over the bridge is something that a lot of people are doing, so getting some creativity in there, however, and he bails, which isn't good. So 24 for William Cortez. So Euro, decent use of the park, but not greatly standing out. He's still on his, still developing at this stage. The backside disaster was nice. The 540 was cool, but probably spent a little bit too much time back and forth, half piping in the deep end. 60.
Yeah, a bit of a lean over the teardrop. Frontside air, yeah, Euro. Wow, banging backside melon 5 in the deep. now it's going to be time good for Euro.
Jianjing, low level sort of run, repeating 50-50s and sketching basics with a bail at the end. I will say it's fun to watch him skate, but even in saying that, it doesn't really hit the criteria needed to score well. Which, I mean, actually you can skate amazingly well and not really hit the criteria. So being entertaining is one thing, but actually skating to the criteria and fulfilling the criteria can be a completely different thing. So from Jianjing, I give him an 18 for that one. Okay, so Lenny Jansen, backside disaster is nice. Again, tailgate varial is nice, but the bail costs him 29. Hyun Seong Im, bail early in there, which cost him. In the past, before the Olympics, the judges never really gave much thought to bail scores. As soon as you bail, you just got to score. With the series of the Olympics and the qualifying and all the emerging countries, beginning with skateboarding, there became more emphasis on the judges to get the skaters on the lower end or the runs that weren't as good scored more accurately. And that means judges had to pay a bit more attention to bail runs and making sure that we had them in the right positions. So now judges pay a lot more attention to the bail runs and trying to get that right and get the scale right with the bail runs, not just the made runs, which is different to how skate competitions were judged before skateboarding got in the Olympics. But Hyun Seong Im, for that run, he gets a 16. Okay, so Elias Nielsen, slightly better run than before. So the sugarcane is a little bit more creative than the tail slide on the bank, but his rail isn't on. So if we go back to the history of sugarcane, the actual rail is supposed to be on. It's like a Smith, like running backwards. So more creative trick, not done as well. Got to get an overall impression of how that goes. I think just the creativity of the sugarcane maybe is better than the tail slide in this instance. He replaces the 360 Indy with the kickflip Indy, and so in comparing those, I think he landed low on the 360 Indy in the prior run, which I think really takes away from that particular trick, because I think when you're doing that trick on small transition, you land low, it just becomes like a fly out when you're landing low. So I prefer in that case the kickflip Indy. That's not always the case. I think sometimes a 360 Indy could be better than a kickflip Indy, but I think in that particular case, going with the execution, I think the kickflip Indy was better, and I think overall, I think that run was better than his first run. So 36. So next skater, Ayumu Hirano. So Ayumu is shredding in this run. Seems to be going higher. To get a little bit negative, the frontside stand-up grind over the bridge, he accidentally went to 50-50. Still hard, but it's not perfect. It was supposed to be a 5.0. Clearly, to me, it was supposed to be a 5.0. Goes into 50. So, when it's close, we've got to take these things into consideration. He made it though, still good. The Melon 540 is gnarly. It's a full run with a variety of tricks. Good use of park. Execution not perfect. Exciting. sometimes you get the executions not perfect, but it can create some excitement. I think on some of that is the case, but I think, the execution wasn't perfect. It was blasting, which I like. It was a great run, and at this stage, I think he's leading with that one. So 64.3. Okay, so Jagger Eaton. So this was a really heavy run. So in the deep, the 540 into the 360 Indy to switch Ollie was a really good line. Slightly half-pipey in that he's just hitting the quarters. It's not the greatest use of the park with that line, but I would give it a pass just because of the difficulty compared to the rest of the field on the day. I think these days that line's not overly hard. I mean, mainly because the best skaters all wear pads and a helmet, which doesn't affect the score, but it just makes it a bit easier for them to, more likely for them to do a line like that. So potentially that same line wouldn't stand out as it would today, but the whole run was really, really good. He mixed up the stuff in the shallow end and then did the kickflip frontside blunt. I mean, I think that's an amazing move. I think that's still just as valid today as it was back then. Haven't seen anyone else do it since then. It's not a trick we don't see a lot of, and mixed with the vert tricks, I think it was really, really good. I think that run to me is a 83. Okay, so that's group number 1 of the men's for this judging exercise. Okay, so now to do some of the commenting and scoring of women's group number 1. First skater, we have Mami Tezuka. She's the anchor score, which means the judges all give her the same score, and that's to calibrate their scores. So she starts really strong in the deep end, frontside feeble. Back then, that was fairly advanced. Not so much advanced anymore. She doesn't really half-pipe the deep end. She links it together well. Hip to bank to teardrop was a good way to link the park together. She has a good use of the park. She does repeat frontside grind, and she bails with 6 seconds remaining, so she will be punished for that. Okay, so Mami Tezuka, score of 40 for her first run, the anchor run. Okay, so next skater, Lucrezia Zaratini, run number 1. So a lot of basics by today's standards. Lost some speed in there. We got a 23 for that run. Okay, so Heini from Finland, Heini Luotola, I believe. So unique style, which is good. Like anytime we can have something creative or different, it helps someone stand out. It's an old school style with some flavor. Not a lot of difficulty or advanced skill. Some early grabs in there, which isn't preferred. Kick turns are never awarded for judges, and we had a bail. So I think that was an 18. So Jordan Santana, smooth style, frontside lip slide was long, loses a bit of power after the blunt. The boneless was only halfway up the bank. Like, really, execution plays a part in scoring, and if you don't execute very well, then that's going to be a problem. In this run, execution is lacking a bit. Bail didn't count, but 32 for Jordan Santana. Bella Kenworthy, run number 1. So use of the park with the teardrop was good. So the execution of the 50-50 was a little bit kiddie style, as was the amount she stalled on the blunt and the spine trick. She is a kid, so fair enough she has a kiddie style. But we also have to remember that we're judging the best in the world. It's not a kids competition. It's a 5-star world skate event, I believe, or a world championship or the highest level. So if you're a kid, you're going to get scored accordingly. So we have to punish her for the not quite perfect execution. So she had 14 seconds remaining. She got hammered for that, 17.2. Okay, so May Sugawara. So May in this clip seems very young as well, but her style and execution is more mature than Bella's. She has a lot of speed, a lot of basics, but done well for the time. I think in a lot of videos I point out that any trick done well is good, be it a basic or a difficult trick. It's always good to see a trick done well, and May does her tricks well. She gets her foot on the coping on the boneless, whereas other people were often lower. Just a note as well, bonelesses were done on this bank a lot. Like, it wasn't a trick that you could really stand out on. But May did do it with her foot on the coping better than other people. So I think that was good. So May rolled over the teardrop. So just a note, since that event, the judging has become more refined. When skaters have become more close in skill level and more close in the runs that they do, the judges scrutinize their runs a lot harder. And when the judges are scrutinizing runs way harder to try and figure out who is better than who, they're looking for really, really small, or things that could be perceived as small differences between runs. May rolled over the teardrop, and ultimately you'd prefer to someone to air over it, grind over it, whatever. So just pointing it out, I think at that stage back in 2019, it was maybe a bit less refined, whereas now judges, when they see that, they're going to be like, okay, well, you could have done a trick over it. It's like rolling past an obstacle rather than hitting it. You're definitely a better skater if you're airing it than if you're rolling over it, put it that way. Yeah. So then May does a frontside nose blunt, and she stalls and she grabs in to go in. I think of course it's way better to land a trick and stall it and do it not very well than bail it. I think that's quite clear. But it's not optimal to sort of stall on there. And then as well, I think grabbing frontside on blunts is definitely not as good as no grab. But a good run from May, 41. Okay, Valeria Bertaccini. So first run, not a huge amount of consistency throughout her run. And when I say consistency, even though she made her run, there wasn't a lot of stuff in it. It wasn't consistent, thick through with a lot of stuff. So all these girls were pioneers to get skating where it is today. Like, skating couldn't be where it is today without these girls doing what they did. And every time every event, you know, just got better and better and better. And so, say even though we didn't have a huge amount of stuff in this run, it's not to take nothing away from Valeria and her place in the development of skating. Yeah, it just didn't have the same amount of stuff as what the more advanced girls could do then, or even more so now. So 21 for Valeria on her first run. Isadora Pacheco, good style, good use of park, uses the pocket, not a lot of girls using the pocket, using the spine. Comparing a run today, like, we don't have a lot of difficulty in the run. Not a lot of variation in the run, but when she used the half pipe, she used it without half piping. So that was cool. She has a line going through it, using the whole thing and not going back and forth. So that was good use of the park. I think for back then, this was a pretty good run. I think comparing it now to the skating, it doesn't quite cut it. And that was 5 years ago. Girls skating has advanced huge amounts. So we give that a 42. Lucrezia Zaratini, run number 2. So slightly less variety with a bail. I think she did a 5-0 in her first run. She did a couple of 50-50s in this one. Not quite as good as her last run, so a bit less, 19 points. So run number 2 of Haney Luatola. Full run, slightly better than her last run. But still, yeah, not comparable to the girls that are skating later with bigger scores. So 20. So run number 2, Jordan Santana, better run, better execution in some parts. I think the lip slide was longer than the last run, although execution did lack in some areas. It was better than her last run, marginally, so a 34. Okay, so run number 2 of Bella Kenworthy. So she had a bit more flow, better execution, but still her approach is very unadvanced, very immature. The invert is a good trick, but execution is very low. She's a backside kickflip under coping, which back then was like a sort of an innovative trick for girls, because girls weren't doing a lot of kickflips in their runs. I mean, they're not like a backside flip. There's still not a lot of people doing backflips in their run in the girls. But it's very, very low, so we have to take that into consideration. It was a good run, but execution, power, and speed let it down. She's just a kid at this comp, and she shows like she's got a lot of promise. 41.5. Okay, so Mai Sugawara, second run. So again, young girl, more power than most young girls, but still not an adult. Good style, good variations of, good variety of tricks. Smith grind is great for such a little kid, but we're not really giving kids point here. It's a high level competition, so we don't give points just because she's a little girl. But it's still a good Smith grind. It's a smooth run using a lot of the skate park. The front side nose blunt was a cool trick for back then, yanking it in. She comes in quickly, grabs tuck knee, so it's as good as a yanked in nose blunt would do, but it's not at the same level as a non-grabbing front side nose blunt. So she added in a better Smith, she had better execution, and she gets a better score because the execution was what brought her first run score down. Doesn't really cut it for 2024. One of the better runs out of this group of skaters, I would say. 53.1. Okay, so Valeria Bertoncini. Much like her first run, not a high level of the criteria met on the overall impression. She bailed 17.7. Isadora Pacheco, second run. So I think this run was a pretty rad run in this group of girls. I think the best runs were May and hers. I think both runs were lacking in some aspects. And really, with the overall impression way of judging, it's really a matter of getting both of them together and comparing them how they fulfilled the criteria. So Isadora has a more mature style. She has a good style. She adds in another trick at the end of her run, so that means that she went faster in that run, and she also added a trick. It's a little bit better execution, but the one thing I will say about Isadora's run is in the first 5 walls, like immediately, I think in the first 3 walls, she's already repeated a melon twice. And then she also does 3 sort of backside 50-50 or 5-0 grind variations. So not the hardest tricks, and she's repeating them. Like backside 5-0 on the small section, backside 50-50 in the small section, 50-50 over the spine. 50-50 over the spine's good. But we've already seen sort of 2 backside 50 or 5-0 variations, and we've already just seen 2 backside melons. So there's some repetition there, and then straight after that she does a backside 5-0 on the deep, so repeating the backside 5-0 again. So we have not a lot of variety, a bit of repetition, good style, and at the end she does use the deep end very, very well as far as not back and forth. But I think for that run it's a 47. All right, so that's group number 1 of the women's.